We are happy to continue the conversation with the Iraqis about what the right structure is. Our mission set there is very clear. We've been there to perform a training mission to help the Iraqi security forces be successful and to continue the campaign against ISIS, to continue the counter-Daesh campaign. We're going to continue that mission, but as times change and we get to a place where we can deliver upon what I believe and the President believes is our right structure with fewer resources dedicated to that mission, we will do so. We also have today a NATO team that's here at the State Department working to develop a plan which will get burden sharing right in the region as well.
So that's what the Secretary of State had to say a little earlier. Let's bring in Osama bin Javaid. He's joining us from Baghdad. Any more clarity on what the Iraqi parliament does next?
Well, Doreen, we'll wait to see what the Iraqi parliament has to say as it is going to meet in a few hours on Saturday morning. But it is a very interesting point that the U.S. Secretary of State made, that they will continue their presence and fight against ISIL, which is a big question mark because since Soleimani's assassination, the coalition's efforts against ISIL, the NATO's mission against ISIL, all of it remains suspended. There are no military campaigns by the coalition which are being run right now against ISIL. And the Iraqi Prime Minister made that clear the last time he spoke to parliamentarians on Sunday, saying that if the U.S. coalition came in 2014, when Iraq asked for help against ISIL, now the threat has diminished. Now the nature of the threat has changed. And since the events of Friday, after Soleimani and Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis were assassinated, these forces are having to protect themselves, and Iraqi forces will have an additional responsibility to protect them as well, and something which they cannot take on. And according to the Iraqi Prime Minister, the only way forward is for foreign troops to leave. This is something that he made clear, not just to his parliament, but also to the U.S. ambassador, and according to the handout we were given by the Prime Minister's office to the Secretary of State as well, where he asked that the United States should send a delegation so that the mechanism of withdrawal can be worked out. And according to the U.S. Secretary of State, that is not something that we will be discussing. So it goes to show that an important ally who has been, in the case of Iraq, has been defeated an invasion from the United States, essentially, where it forced the United States to leave in 2011, is asking the United States to leave again. But the U.S. is adamant that it is not going to do so. It is interesting that he mentioned, Mike Pompeo, that he is going to be talking about how to expand and further involve other parties to this conflict in Iraq and to further the fight against ISIL. And he has spoken to his Canadian counterpart as well, where the United States president has been criticizing NATO on one hand. He has also hinted at a wider NATO role as if there is a possibility of reducing U.S. troops in Iraq. Again, we'll wait and see until Saturday morning when Iraq's parliament reconvenes whether it's going to discuss that or not.
Okay, Osama, thank you for that update from Baghdad. Well, here's how the numbers break down. There are nearly 6,000 U.S. troops operating between western Iraq and northern Syria. At the time of the U.S. invasion in 2003, there were at least 170,000 American troops deployed in Iraq. By 2007, they began withdrawing as President George W. Bush faced criticism at home and calls to bring the troops home. In December 2011, the last U.S. troops left under an agreement with the Iraqi government. But just 5 years later, in 2016, at least 5,000 troops were once again deployed to fight against ISIL. Yasmine Zaki is an attorney and the former chief of communications for the mission of Iraq to the United Nations. She says there's a lot of posturing from both sides, but it's unlikely that American troops will leave Iraq.
There's the United States claiming victory, there's Iran claiming victory, and then there's Iraq, which is trying to maintain its sovereignty, but also some face in front of the Iraqi people. I believe that the U.S. Obviously, it's very hard to know what's going to happen right now because things are moving very quickly. But the U.S. government is likely to stay in Iraq. When they pulled out in 2011, it only took a few years for ISIS to take over the second largest city in Iraq. And that was a disaster, not just for Iraqis, but also for the U.S. and Iran. So we do need U.S. presence as Americans in Iraq, and so do the Iraqi people. So what we're probably going to see now is a little bit more posturing from the people of Iraq, a little bit more rhetoric to appease the Iranian government, which is so heavily overseeing the Iraqi government. But overall and ultimately, the U.S. government cannot afford to pull out of Iraq, and it cannot afford to hand Iraq over to Iran.